the core network is only valuable if it's connected into the wider mobile ecosystem. So what we had to do was achieve that by integrating with an IMSI donor or a mobile operator, someone who could help us plug into the global mobile ecosystem and would enable us to access their global roaming footprint. So we were able to achieve that with the support of Jersey Telecom and the team at Bellows IoT. So that's live, it's in production, which means we issue our own SIMs, and those SIMs operate in 150 countries around the world, more than 500 networks. So fantastic. But also what we also needed to do was to build our API and our portal, the platforms that our customers can use to interact with the core network. But it's fantastic. So we've done all of that, and we're pleased to say now that we've launched it. So as I say, Jersey Telecom is our first IMSI donor. We've got customers trialing services, and our customers are MVNO businesses who are great at reaching enterprises and IoT or enterprise solution providers. So they've got route to market, but they don't necessarily have the technology that we have access to. So they're a logical customer for us, or solution providers themselves, and indeed developers. In line with that, we're really delighted to be sponsoring TADSummit at the weekend. So the last 6 to 8 weeks, been sending SIMs off around the world with Mr. Paul Allen and his, the team, the virtual team that are running all the physical locations. I'm pleased to say some of the SIMs have actually arrived and managed to get through customs. So we're really looking forward to this weekend. What's been occupying Mike a lot over the last 2 months has also been building out our global edge network. And that's really important so that on a regional basis we can start to deliver an optimized experience for customers across the globe. That might involve reducing latency because we're able to deliver a packet gateway in a particular market, or enabling traffic to stay within a particular country so that we can meet regulatory requirements that a customer might have. What Mike and the team have done a great job of is kind of accessing some key partnerships with Equinix and Confone that enable us to scale up that infrastructure very cost efficiently and flexibly, but also the software development, the development of IP, which I won't try and get into, but using kind of CUTS principles enables us to deploy those packet gateways in very efficient ways. We're in the process of onboarding new IMSI donors so that we can actually have a library of different IMSIs from different providers and actually enable our customers to benefit from a global connectivity footprint. But also, again, kind of this is the no BS bit, to be kind of really open. We've been on a journey ourselves, which is more focused on go-to-market and commercial execution, and involving lots of testing and learning and iterating about our path to product market fit. So let me kind of talk about that now for a few minutes, and that comes back to the title of the presentation as well, about moving beyond the IoT. So it is a journey. I think what we've learned over the last year, since we've been out trialing a live product, is actually just the need, how much education is required, because of this principle which I described before, not principle, but just the way that people have become habituated to the idea that telecoms really is a black box, that it's beyond their ability to control unless they're a very big and powerful customer. We've spent a lot of our time helping people understand what actually is possible with if you have access to a software-defined mobile network, basically. And again, Mike will show you some of the capabilities, and that's a journey, and we've got a lot of work to do. To kind of educate, kind of the market about what is possible, but I guess more kind of practically to work out which parts of the market will become our key entry points, so that we can build that momentum and help to materialise the future that we're really excited about. Again, kind of as a marketing guy, something that we've been very conscious of and had to keep reminding ourselves about is to not fall into that trap of talking features instead of benefits. And obviously this is where the iteration comes in. We found ourselves at times being so kind of excited about the technology that we've then we've had to then kind of take a step back and engage with customers again to really listen, stop talking, open the ears, and then listen about the value they see, and then change the messaging kind of in line with that. So an interesting journey that just will continue. And also, and again, this won't be a surprise to anyone listening, we've kind of started to really focus on partnerships as the way into our ecosystem, the way for us to identify the partners that we can work with that may bring an established brand and the credibility that comes with that. They may bring additional capabilities. They may bring, as a mobile operator, for example, actually kind of IMSIs and the kind of the value on the connectivity side. Different kinds of partners will bring different things. But what we've again, has become not a surprise, but something that's kind of a key focus for us now is establishing those partnerships which will enable us to scale. Basically, we know that we've got a very valuable piece of the jigsaw, which is very different to what's there today, and we've got to work out who we can work with to really expose that to the maximum number of users in the shortest possible time. And in that vein, we've also decided, learned and decided that it's important for us to move beyond kind of, the IoT as a concept. And just to kind of talk about that for a second, there may be different views in the room of IoT, but the way we now think about it, that term, certainly in terms of mobile connectivity context, comes with some baggage. There's a lot of operators and VCs that bought into a lot of hype many years ago, and the volume, the revenue, the profitability that was expected just hasn't materialised. Our view is that in the market as a whole, IoT tends to be associated with lower value, more commodity-driven use cases like simple trackers, whereas in fact actually there are many use cases like HD cameras or heart monitors or whatever it might be, where the volumes of data, or connected cars even, where the volumes of data and the criticality of those services is actually very important, and the IoT label is not helpful. We think because IoT has sometimes been associated with remote devices that are out in the field, and so perhaps more vulnerable to tampering, and therefore more of a security risk, or because those devices may be dumb in the sense that they can't support encryption, or for other reasons, IoT has tended to become associated with higher risk. And then because the customers are coming on to kind of what our solution, software-defined network, if customers have the kind of capabilities that we've developed, which enable a much greater level of real-time control over the connectivity to those individual SIMs and devices, we think the risks around that, security issues will be reduced. But historically, that hasn't been the case. Customers haven't had control, because control of those SIMs has sat with their mobile operator partner, and because of that, the tendency has been for the IoT solution instead to be managed on a standalone basis. There's been a Chinese wall between the IoT solution perceived as higher risk, and also, as you mentioned on the slide there, actually kind of by definition, IoT suggests that those devices are available on the internet, which doesn't need to be the case at all, but again reinforces this perceived risk. For all of those reasons, our perception is that customers have tended to think of IoT as a standalone, separate solution. What we believe is, instead, we want to give customers capabilities to enable, quote, IoT solutions to be managed just like any other enterprise IT asset, to break down the wall between telecoms and IT, as I said. And that comes back to the title of the presentation, really. So as we move forward as a business, we're going to be talking more about digital transformation, and there's been quite a lot of commentary from various sources, I think, around the same sort of topic over the last 6 months or so that we've picked up. the idea that IoT isn't really helpful anymore. And maybe this is a positive side of maturity. The technologies now enable mobile connectivity across a wide range of use cases to be to be managed by customers in a much more agile way. So that's where we're going. And as an example of the kind of capabilities, I think Mike now is going to go through some recorded demos of some of those specifics, and then I'm sure, Mike, you'll be able to do kind of one-on-ones later on if you wanted to.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you very much. Not too much bullet BS in there. So yeah, from a techie perspective, in true TADSummit style, I'll be happy to do any dangerous demos later if anyone wants to see it live. It does really work. It's not all recorded. We weren't quite brave enough to do it up here though on in the PowerPoint, but yeah. So the principle of what we built is, as Tim said, is very much about cloud style agility. It's very difficult to demo a core network. Who wants to look at protocols? Well, I do. But apart from a few hands going up there. On top of that, there's an API layer which exposes all that. It's still pretty tricky to demo an API, so we built a portal at the top. All the portal does is call our APIs, so our portal does nothing that our customers can't do directly. So I'll just rattle through a couple of the highlights. I could go on for hours about this, so I'll try and be prompt. So the first concept in our architecture is this concept of a vSlice. So in the same way as AWS or a VPC, 2 o'clock in the morning, halfway through your pizza, you need a network with some servers, you spin it up. You can't do that on the mobile side until you do this concept of a vSlice. So that's the first place we start. Things like, off the back of a vSlice, you can obviously create things like VPNs and and links into AWS and cloud, etc. And a lot of that routing is controlled around this concept of routing policies, which is like software-defined networks on top instead of a traditional monolithic mobile core. So Tim, if you hit the button, I think that's what we show first, isn't it? Yeah. So policy defined.
Mike, can you just stand over to?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No. Perfect.
Yeah. So here's just an example of creating a new routing policy, a set of rules for defining how traffic to and from a particular set of SIMs should be routed. So let's assume these are SIM cards you're going to stick in tablets, you're going to distribute to your sales team. Those sales team need to be able to access various different back-end systems. So firstly, we're going to create a rule to give them access to the CRM, to the corporate CRM. So we're specifying a set of matching parameters to identify that traffic. So that's the IP address range, which is used by the CRM. It's web traffic. So for that, we want to forward over the VPN to our AWS. Sorry, in this case, a cross connector to Amazon for that platform. Next rule you might create is saying, well, we need to be able to print things. We need to be able to print things from the headquarters. So let's route printer-related traffic over a VPN into the corporate network. That's the IP address space used for that. It's the typical, the appropriate protocols for printing. That traffic we're going to send over the VPN to the headquarters. But they also need access to the internet. So we'll create another rule which identifies all other traffic and routes that to the internet. In this case, we want to route it out from the US, so they always get a US IP address from a geo IP perspective. So we've created that as a policy. Click save, and then with no change to the devices, no changes to APNs, to anything else, that is the policy that will be applied to those set of SIMs. And as I say, I can show a live demo and make some changes to that later after this. So what's next on the list, Tim? Packet tracing, another example. When things go wrong or things don't quite go to plan, us techies will always be able to dive into Wireshark. If you need to be able to get a packet trace from your operator in the past, you raise a ticket. They say next Thursday 3 o'clock, we'll do it for 10 minutes. Doesn't really help. So in this platform, you want to do a packet trace on a SIM. You click the button. That's it. It's now capturing all the traffic to and from that SIM wherever it is in the world, storing it. They can be then searched, analysed, and troubleshoot. So then we can either, if we're stopping the trace there, we can view the packets, or we can download it as a Wireshark file. So in this case, we can see what that sim is doing real time at 2:30 in the middle of the night. So that's also something that customers ask for a lot. So next, what's after that, Tim? There's not too many of these, don't worry. Another one, remote access. So getting remote access to devices, whether it's a server, whether it's a device or a sensor, typically involves spinning up a VPN or putting them on the internet. Or what if you could just have an SSH console in the browser to inject directly in real time without opening up any security holes? So that's what this does. So it injects itself into the console, so you can do really important stuff like run Ensnake. What else do you want to be able to do on your Linux console? All things which really simple, but as techies we know, save a lot of time and make them accessible in such an easy way. So, something else on there, Tim? I think those are the important ones. Oh yeah, signaling. Great mystery. Loads of magical stuff happens at the signaling level in mobile networks. It would be really useful to be able to get access to that and respond to it. So in the platform here, anything that happens in the network, so for example, a new data session being created, creates an event, you can hook into your event bus, into your webhooks, any other back-end platform, exposing all the information that's been happening behind the scenes. So as a developer, you can act on it, respond to it, and use it to drive your application. And that's probably, I could talk about this for hours, but we've got 3 seconds to go, so I'll try and do this one quickly. Network steering, something which is normally locked away well within the operators. If you have SIM cards in fire alarms, you want them to work whatever network they can see. If you have a SIM cards in tracking devices traveling across Europe, you might pick and choose a network per country that you want to prefer and steer the traffic to. In our system, that's all configurable by the developer per SIM in real time. So the whole principle here is things that were always possible if you had very deep pockets and a lot of patience and the right contact in the operator. We can then expose and democratize to the developer so they can do themselves, whether they've got one SIM, a million SIMs, whether they're a startup or a big multinational. So I think that's probably it. Yeah, any questions on the BS side or the tech side?
Get away from the speaker because it's going to cause feedback. Mike, listen, this is the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle, all right? And having built things the hard way, like I know you have in the past, especially private interconnects on enterprise networks to mobile and for M2M applications, I mean, this is just like brilliant. And took me 5 minutes to prime my VPN up yesterday and interconnected with our platform. What I'm curious about though is when it comes to the if you like, all these sort of like knobs and dials that you have, right? Where do you see this going next, right? I see where you're going with having sort of like local interconnects and POPs, etc. out there, right? But how far can we take this, and what's your thoughts on dealing with some of the problems we have with eSIMs and EUICCs, right? And things with APN changes and all of that jazz. So where do you see that going, and how soon will we have something cool where we can again switch, obviously operator profiles and still benefit from all the cool packet gateway plumbing that you guys have built?
Great. I mean, that's a sort of perfect question. It's almost as if we'd set that up. I've almost got the answers are already popping up in my head while you're talking there. There's some really good, a few points there. So for us, physical SIM, eSIM, we don't really care. We can support either. And one of the sort of awkward truths with eSIM and the whole move in that space is when you deploy a new eSIM profile and switch profile, you also switch in core, effectively, quite often switch in core. So it therefore means that all the configuration and integration you've done is suddenly lost in a way. So the the IMSI donors that we're talking to at the moment, there's a large number for some of the reasons Tim talked about before: pricing, coverage, regulation. all those IMSI profiles are routed back to the same core. So when you do an eSIM switch, because you're going to deploy your SIM cards in Latin America, you don't have to change anything. It's on the same portal. The identity on the portal doesn't change. The VPN integration doesn't change. Everything's the same. So we're to try and solve that eSIM challenge a little bit. In terms of where we're going next. Tim mentioned about regional breakout. So we've deployed our US, Virginia. Our first integration was Amsterdam. So the next one, Virginia and Singapore, we've done now. So those are the main IPX peering points. The concept there being that you can control latency, you can control the routing of traffic per application in the same way as with steering profiles. And it's not just the fact case of the device will always attach to its closest point. All that's configurable, and I can show a demo of that afterwards, where you can say, for these group of SIMs, they're in EPOS terminals in Brazil, so therefore always break them out through the Sao Paulo P gateway. So those are the sort of things we're going. That's the direction we're going next. Moving away from the purely roaming-based approach to local specific solutions, but all back to a single core. Sorry, Alan,
No, just violently agreeing.
Oh, sorry.
Quick follow-up timeline on that in terms of like let's say timeline for the local breakout.
Yeah, so US and Singapore is live by the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're aiming for there. The next points of presence are really being driven market by market. So there's a few markets now where we've actually recruited sales teams on the ground. Like the previous presenters were talking about, we've definitely seen that there are industries where you've got to visit, and as we're visiting in some of those locations, we're getting feedback from customers and operators saying we need a point of presence, we need local breakout. Because our P gateway stack is all our own, so there's no cost there. It's a software. It's a software deployment effectively. We expect to run one of those every quarter at least for the next year or so.
Excellent. So again, thank you so much, Mike. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Tim.
So things are always. Oh, yeah, back. So things are always sort of hopping around. So Amit has asked, can we do his presentation later? So we'll do it later. So Dave, you're up next.
All right.
Just plug that in. You want to just get an adapter? Perfect. Okay, so it's Dave up next, and then we'll do Bogdan. So that should bring us roughly back on time, and lunch should have been delivered by 12:30. So what I'm going to do to squeeze a quart into a pint pot is, as always, we have Thomas has been quite ill this week and having to do a fair bit of travel. So he pre-recorded because, in between most probably bouts of throwing up and needing to lie down, he managed to squeeze in the presentation. So I'm going to do that mostly in the latter half of the lunch break, and then hopefully we can get Amit to take over Thomas's slot. Just so you know, there's a few shifts happening, but it's just because of life. All right, so Dave, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm Dave Horton, the creator of 2 open source projects, Jambones and Interactio, that I'm going to talk to you about. First of all, I want to thank Alan for everything he does. He's been a big supporter of my project, so I definitely love to support his stuff. When I heard this was going to be in Paris, that was kind of a no-brainer, and even more so when I realized the World Cup of Rugby was going to be going on. So I came over a week early and got to spend time in Marseille, and did one of my favorite things in the world. Well, this is being recorded, so my favorite thing in the world is spending time with my wife, but my second favorite thing in the world is to watch the Welsh rugby team play. I spent part of the year in Wales, 5 years or so, when I was first starting these open source projects, and loved the culture and the rugby culture over there, so it's been fantastic. A couple months ago when I told Alan I wanted to come and do a talk, I was kind of busy, heads down writing code, and I just couldn't think of what I should talk about. I had just done another talk, I didn't want to recycle that. So I kind of just asked him, what do you think? And like ChatGPT, he sent me back a whole talk, basically with bullet points. And this is what he sent back, which is, you'll probably see. First of all, this is what he sent back to me. And when I saw it, my response was, what the hell? This is pretty bombastic kind of language here. I like to think I'm kind of a humble guy, but now I've got to talk to this. And then I realized, okay, he's trying to be provocative, and that's good, and this will spur some discussion. But his title was How Open Source Jambones is Disrupting CPaaS. And I have to say that triggered something with me because I feel like we've fetishized this term disrupt. I'm just so tired of seeing it everywhere, and the concept that we have to break something all the time just sort of goes against the grain with me. What about continuous improvement? What about improving what's there? What about reaching back into the past and finding things to draw forward? I don't mind it if it just didn't turn up in front of my face every day in any tech article I read. But Jambones is an open source CPaaS, and then he makes the point you no longer need to use Twilio, Cinch, or Tonix. I know some of those products. Jambones and its community are disrupting a $100 billion market. Okay, come back to that. The next one is true, though. Open source is hard, and I've made loads of stupid mistakes, and people love to hear about mistakes, so I was totally on board with that. Best of all, you're going to learn $100 billion worth of stuff in the next 20 minutes, apparently. And, so no pressure. But the gist of it is a talk that I did want to do, which is my journey with open source, some things that I've learned. So let's get right into it. Is Jambones disrupting CPaaS? Well, yes, but really only in the sense that open source is disrupting telecom. But no, in the sense that Jambones it's not disruptive, really. It's not new stuff. It's a culmination of what I see as 15-year industry trends. And, the way I look at it is Twilio and Jambones to me are kind of two sides of the same coin. If I look at Twilio, I see a company, that founded the CPaaS on a really rock-solid, impregnable foundation. But in the last 5 years really hasn't innovated much, has really transitioned more to acquisition. It does a lot of nonsensical marketing stuff, celebrity-driven webinars, which seem pointless to me, and hasn't executed in spaces where I thought it really would have, like hosted contact center. They should have really owned that, I think, to a large extent, so they really haven't. In all regards, it's a company that's sort of milking the long tail of this market that they've created. And Jambones is really the other side of the coin. It just illustrating over the last 3 years that basically open source has progressed to where a one-man project can build a platform that is basically 80% of what Twilio does. It's just an illustration of that. So is there a disruption there? Jambones is not something new. It's more a reflection of what's happened in open source over that period of time. And I think it's worth reflecting on that because like Ernest Hemingway said about going broke, things happen slow and then fast, and that's sort of what's happened in this space. Twilio was a product built for its time. That was 2008, very early cloud, so they were right there. A lot of telcos weren't on the cloud. They were ready to go when they were. Back then, we forget, there was really broad, at least in the US, very broad patent protection. People were trying to get very broad patents and succeeding in patents like, there was a guy running around with an IVR patent in the 2000s. It was ridiculous. So I had a commercial company at the time, and we had to be thoughtful about, well, is this guy going to sue us? What do we do? Where's patent? That's changed radically in the US for the better. We don't spend any time now thinking about, hey, is this going to violate someone's patent protection? Twilio had the advantages of scale, kind of a first mover advantage, especially before there was a cloud. You really had to have a lot of dollars put together to buy infrastructure that it was hard to catch up to. Systems back then were really complex. It's not like today where click and I've got a Ciptron, click and I've got speech recognition. It was buying hardware and software from Nuance and trying to figure out how to integrate it and getting dialogic cards and the like. It was just very different. And so of course you would pay someone to do all that for you. And that led to a high cost of change and substitution. These solutions were complex, it was hard to change off of them. And then finally, something that's changed is all the complementary services you needed to get a SIP trunk. Those were actually pretty hard to do back in 2008. You sort of had to be kind of a high priest to know someone, how are we going to get a SIP trunk from this carrier? Now it's simple. Again, credit card, click, and you're done. So all of that stuff changed, and it was really the foundation. It was the reason you needed a company like Twilio. That plus the convenience, which they still offer. But increasingly, you don't need that. A lot of enterprises still will choose for the convenience. But telcos and CSPs really don't need that anymore. So those were all barriers to entry that protected their business. They're basically all gone now. And Jambones is just a reflection of that. I'm not sure what people know about Jambones, so I'm going to do a super quick kind of speed round pre-taped video, 3 minutes, just so you know kind of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to focus on what are sort of the winning features that, from my perspective, have made Jambones achieve some degree of success. The first is it can run anywhere, so you don't always want a hosted provider providing a SaaS, especially in today's era of data privacy. You maybe won't run it in your own VPC, on your own hardware, here, there, wherever. It's a bring your own everything CPaaS, so there's no point in me selling you speech recognition services when it's a click to go get it. There's no point in me selling you phone numbers when it's easy to go get it. Everything is designed that you can plug in your own everything. Data privacy is sort of a core principle, as it should be today, and look at some reasons that is just because you're using a provider to provide communication service doesn't mean they should be holding, things like customer transcripts or recordings under their lock and key. It should be under your lock and key. And finally, it's open source. You can pack it with your own innovations, and these are probably the 4 reasons why people migrated off of commercial SaaS to Jambones. So let's see if I can just. So just a video, I'll talk through it. But again, the first thing is run anywhere. So in 5 seconds you can sign up for our SaaS. You can pick a domain and you can do that, and you're up and going. Get a free account, and that goes as long as you want, and you can change it. But it turns out most people, most Jambones customers, want to run their own stuff. That's why one reason why they pick Jambones. So you can spin it up in CloudFormation, run it in your own VPC in AWS. Can be as small as a single server, can be a cluster, auto-scale cluster. All this stuff's created for you. Not just AWS, you can run in Kubernetes if you want, you can run in Google Cloud, you can run in Proxmox. Basically, you can run it anywhere. Bring your own everything. We support a bunch of different speech services, probably more than any other platform I've seen. And then when you pick a certain service, we support all the bells and whistles for that service. We also support custom speech. You can plug in your own. Add carriers, pretty straightforward. You can add a trunk to your PBX, to your carrier. We support all the different options you might want to do. You can add your IP addresses, specify whether you want to use encryption for your media and so forth. Looking at call recording, you can record calls, a lot of choices, format, but they're not stored on the platform. They're stored in your storage. You put in your AWS 3, your Google Cloud, your Azure Cloud. We're not going to store your recordings. They belong to you. But we'll let you get recordings and send them off to your account. And then you can play them back. So we were talking about PCAPs earlier. So for people that like PCAPs, of course, you can download a PCAP. What's sometimes even better is open telemetry tracing. So at a very low level, you can dive down in a call, say, was the database lookup slow? No, that was 2 milliseconds. I guess that was the text-to-speech? How long did it take to do that? So you get a really low, customers can see this if you expose it to them, really low level of detail through this tracing to see if you've got to troubleshoot an individual call, what exactly went wrong. You can see the actual transcripts, the raw transcripts returned from the ASR. If you do call recording, then you can play them right out of the portal. I have the sound turned off so you're not hearing it. What's even better is you can overlay the ASR. So here we can see where we're listening for speech. We were using DeepGram. You can see the transcript we got back. Even better, you can see the latency a little bit. You can see the end of speech and then the end of that red bar when we got the transcript. That's about 200 milliseconds. You probably can't see the hash mark. So really good latency there. So it's nice to be able to see that as part of the recording. Of course, you have to manage these systems or clusters, so we provide a profound dashboard with that. Really low level kind of stuff that, you know, your NOC people might want to know. How long are database calls taking, text to speech, talking to the media server, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's basically it. Yeah. So that's kind of my speed run through Jambones. Let's switch back here. So to get to Alan's other point, sort of mistakes I've made, and I've sort of combined it to key decisions, whether they were sometimes driven by mistakes, sometimes things that at the moment seem like not mistakes yet, maybe they will in the future. You know, one big decision was choosing the MIT license. I didn't choose the MIT license because I'm sort of an open source religious kind of person. It was actually a business decision. I was competing in the 2000s with a commercial product against sometimes some open source. And what I saw was that we would go in with a sales cycle of up to a year, and in that year the open source product would improve so much. The tempo of their improvement was much faster because the price was zero and they were out there every day getting beaten up, fixing, getting beaten up, fixing. And I really wanted that tempo, that pace of improvement. I was driven by one thing, which was to build the best software I could, great software. I wasn't thinking about the business model. I just wanted to build the best software I could. The way I was going to do that with the limited resources that I had was through an open source license that was very permissive and got a lot of people in. And it's proven its point. I mean, just some examples. This product's been beat up in a lot of ways that I never could have imagined. So when it comes to ASR, I've got a customer that does taxi dispatching, and he's doing ASR of people in Scotland getting out of a bar at 1 a.m. speaking of a address. And I can't think of anything more challenging for an ASR. Maybe some of the Arabic dialects, but a drunken Scotsman at 1 a.m. is like right up there. And I've got another customer running Jambones that was handling all of the Eurovision calls in his country for, Eurovision ends and everybody calls in to vote on a system that was load tested up to 600 arriving calls per second. So there's all sorts of benefits you get from when you drop the price to zero. The price elasticity is just infinite. As far as the business model, it's really services based. I didn't want to hold anything back. I decided that everything would be open source. So no sort of open core, but you really sort of need these things, but you'll pay for these things. For better or worse, I just wanted to maximize building great software. I saw that as using the open source license. So the business model is services based, and that works out fine. Part of it is convincing customers to buy services. I often have customers who want to think that this could be a secret weapon for them. They don't want people to know they're using it, which is kind of a pain in the neck for me. And I have to change their mindset. I'm not selling you a secret weapon. To use some Old West lingo, I'm selling you a fast horse and a day's ride on the posse. You're going to use this and be ahead of your competition. Now, having said that, that horse is going to get a lot faster if you retain us to help you. That's kind of our message, and it works fairly well. Not everybody chooses or needs to take up support, but that's kind of how we are. I think a mistake I made early on, I remember talking to someone who was really knowledgeable in the industry, and I had just come out with the first version, and it was voice only, it didn't support SMS, and they said, well, Twilio makes all their money off SMS, you definitely got to support SMS. And I said, sure, so I thought about it, I went ahead and did it. And so we added SMS support for SMPP. And there really hasn't been much of a take rate for it because the customers sort of have their own solutions already. I'm not doing anything. Voice is much more challenging and there are problems I'm solving. I'm not sure I'm really solving a lot of problems with SMS, even though the platform does now support it. So I tend to listen more to customers now and less to industry pundits. One of the decisions I made that worked out was investing in a hosted SaaS, and it's been a loss leader because it turns out one of the reasons they come to Jambones is they can run their own stuff anywhere. So while we provide a hosted SaaS platform, what it's really great for is letting people trial the system. In a lot of cases, open source, people's experience with open source is someone You know, it's akin to someone opening up a bag of parts and spilling it on the floor and say, yeah, go assemble that, and you're going to see a great bird cage or something. I don't know. And you know, no one wants to spend a day trying to figure out how parts go together. So having a SaaS where people say, click, here's how it is. Yes, great, love it. Okay, what are my other options for running this has been worthwhile. Interesting, you know, I early on I was doing support kind of on an hourly basis, and that led to it was ineffective in a lot of ways. I tended to do a lot of small projects for people who probably didn't value my time that much. And I started to realize when you're doing an open source project, there's just a universe of people out there, and some of them you can really provide a lot of value for. Some of them you really can't, and that's okay. But if I'm not working every day providing value to somebody, then I'm not putting value in the product. So going to a retainer-based support model made so much more sense, because if I'm not providing you enough value to charge you, whatever, $1,000 a month, that's fine, but it's not really worth my time. I want to find those people for who I am providing that kind of value for. You know, I think community is a license plus a culture, so the license is MIT. So I've tried to establish a culture that the software is free, but the community is different. If you want to take the software, go off and do something with it, that's fine. If you want to participate in the culture, you've got some obligations to contribute. But we have a very broad definition of what it means to contribute. Mainly, it's helping find bugs. A lot of it's just sharing information with the rest of the community. If you find something, you learn something that could be useful to other people, we kind of expect you to share it, unless it's part of your secret sauce. We understand that. But I think it's very important to have a culture where the software is free, but if you want to be in the community, you've got to contribute. Mainly, I want to see everyone caring about making the software better. If they care about that, it will reflect in their actions, and that's enough. But if somebody comes and they're really only focused on solving their problem, that's fine. They just need to go do that. They can't be part of the community. I had the MIT license. I had an interesting story earlier. Before Jambones, my first open source project was Dracula. Also open source, also MIT. And at one point I realized, I came to find out that Amazon was using it. They were using it for Amazon Chime because someone on the project reached out to me. They wanted some changes or something, or they let me know they were using it, and I was like, that's great. I was kind of excited. I thought, well, maybe they'll support the project. But of course, although they're the most powerful company in the world, it's apparently very challenging for them to do something like that. I'm told, no, we can't really support it. Well, you're making fixes. Can you contribute? Well, we really can't contribute fixes. I said, okay, fine. He went on his way. About a couple months later, he contacted me back, and he's kind of pissed off at me. He's like, you made this change. It was a breaking change, and you shouldn't have done it that way. And he was completely right, by the way. But I was sort of pissed at that point. I was like, don't you realize that I care less about you than I do about some teenager in Asia in his bedroom who's hacking on my code and maybe contributing something? And you put yourself in that. It was amazing to me that someone would choose to do that. I'm going to use your software. I'm the richest company in the world. I'm going to put it in some mission critical stuff. But I'm okay if your attitude towards me goes up and down on a monthly basis based on anything, your bank account, whether you have enough money to spend. It was just ridiculous. Anyway, sorry for the digression. But I mainly want people to care about making the software better. And so everybody that comes on, I feel like, I'll give you a free lunch, then you got to work. I help people on board. You don't know anything, I'll get you up to speed. But after that, you got to contribute some way or another. Again, it could just be sharing information, could be finding a good bug, could be documenting something, could be helping us run on another infrastructure we haven't done before. I think one of the things I've learned as an open source founder is that you really have to pay attention to your attention. That's the scarce resource. You go in thinking money's the scarce resource, my time's the scarce resource, but it's really your attention. Actually, I can show this in a different way. In a past life, I was an economist. So this is basically showing a price elasticity demand curve. And you know, if you're pricing something, you're going to choose a price that's going to maximize the you know, that square, the price on demand. When you choose open source, it's because you want that price elasticity that goes to infinite when you go way out there. But that means you get all sorts of different people in your project. You've got a person like P1 who puts a pretty high value on what you're doing. You got a person like P2 who uses it because it's free, doesn't put a high value. For him or her, it doesn't have as high value. And that's fine. That's fine. Those people can be in the project. But you can't be spending a lot of your attention on those P2 people. Because by definition, you're not creating much value for them. You've got to find the people, the P1s who you are creating value for, and really put your attention there is what I've learned. So if you price a support contract, you ought to price it that you expect a large number of people to say, no, that's too expensive. That's great. If I price something that everybody can afford, then I don't have the time, I won't have the attention for that. The last sort of thing what do we do? I feel like if I had a motto for open source, at least the projects I've been involved with, it would be unsafe at any speed. There was a famous book called the 1960s, and it was about a sports car that GM built called the Corvair. And the Corvair was kind of a great car in almost all regards, except it had design flaws in its suspension system such that it went around a curve, you had a pretty good chance it was going to flip over on you. And open source feels like being in that car, seeing a curve a quarter of a mile down the road, accepting that the situation is what it is, and you're going to fix the suspension before you reach the curve. Because you don't have the luxury of a room full of QA engineers to test everything for you. You have to you make a lot of triage decisions. You have to build good software. You have to expect there to be bugs in there. You have to be able to understand what is a good bug, what is a good rate of quality, and you can't look for perfection the way telcos do or other companies that are really operations kind of companies. And you have to be really, really good at that. Jambones competes in the conversational AI space as a voice gateway with audio codes. Now, audio codes has got buildings all over the world and a ton of engineers. So how is it that Jambones, with a team currently of 2, can outcompete them? Because we're moving a lot of people off audio codes onto Jambones. And it's only because of the open source and the pace at which we can improve and smart decisions we make about how to handle risk. And I think that's really just a critical art, I suppose, that is part of open source. That's you really need to get comfortable with, because it's not you know we're used to perfection, but you are moving at a speed where some level of defect is expected and desired if it's the right kind of thing and if you have plans for it. That's my feeling anyways. Oops. Yeah, so that's it. If people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I know people want to get to lunch too, so.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave.
So the lunch isn't here yet, so we are going to have Bogdan up next. But before we do that, any questions for Dave? Yeah, go for it. Just bring the mic over so people. No, it's just so they can hear on the live stream. Okay.
Hi, Ian. So my question is, I just saw you click there on the deep ground.
Yeah.
And is there, you're able to bring in kind of large language model type technologies to roll over the voice. Are you seeing much interest in that? Because that seems interesting to me.
Well, when you say large language models to roll over the voice, what do you mean?
Like data analytics, basically, looking at what's happening in a voice conversation and going, well, what's happening here? Maybe doing analysis of entities.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of companies, Cognigy is an example. So they're in the conversational AI space. They got a really nice low-code editor. You can build NLUs, entities. So they've integrated Jambones as their voice gateway. So it's an omni-channel experience, but if you want it to be voice, you can talk into Jambones. So they provide all that. Jambones itself doesn't currently integrate the NLUs or entity detection or things like that. You know, it'll talk to Dialog, Lex, all those, plus people at Cognigy build their own kind of back-end NLUs. Yeah.
That's a good question, because I think what Jambones enables as we look to the future, and we were discussing on the podcast last week, was a whole category of CX AI players, because they can now, voice just becomes a piece of software, so they can then extend into the Genesis and all those other guys. Rob, just run over.
It was a sort of an answer to that, because if you listen to my presentation tomorrow, I'm going to talk about some AI that we led on top of Jambones to do exactly that as an open source project. So.
Excellent. See, a punter that actually is talking reality. And the reason we had 100 billion in there is against some pundits produced a ridiculous report with a ridiculous number to gain some attention. So never believe any market prediction. I can guarantee you only one thing, they're wrong. Well done. Over to you.
Thank you, Alan. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you again. For me, it's, I think, the fourth year in a row attending the TADSummit. Of course, the first two times were online, but starting last year, again, showing in person to this nice event. Thank you, Alan, for putting everything together. In terms of the topic I will be covering today, I will continue a bit the idea started by Dave, so thank you, Dave, for warming up the audience when it comes to how open source is actually, let's say, serving the real needs of the industry and how these two things work together. Because for some people, there is a bit of a difficulty, let's say, to understand, okay, how you can make use and how you can adapt open source and, industry. So I will be talking about that, especially from the perspective of our project, of the OpenShips project. And because, yes, as I said, we want to understand more or less how an open source project may deliver to the industry, may survive in terms of resources and so on. Let me first start with a quick overview on some concepts about open source. It's just to build a case, not necessarily because it's like some fresh news. First, okay, there is a in many cases, some people call it open source or open software. Other people are calling it free software. So trying to put some ideas behind this. Okay, what it is? It's free or open? What's the truth? And actually, it's, well, it sounds a bit strange. Depends on the size of the project, of course. Let's see. Traditionally, I mean historically, actually, most of the open source projects started like small endeavors, like back garage or dark corner basement projects, where you had one guy doing more or less like a hobby when it comes to to what they do. They simply want to have other people using what they created. So it's a more like a free source because I built something and I let other people to use it. That's it. So more or less that's the very beginning when it comes to the open source. So it's a one-way relation between the creator of the project and the people using it. You just give for free something and that's it. And of course, they're like small things. I'm not saying not valuable, but not reliable, mainly because, okay, it was like more a hobby. You never know when it stops. And also you don't know exactly if that guy is maybe willing to, let's say, get opinions from outside. It's his hobby and that's it. Such projects are more like, again, started from the desire of people to just share what they did and have other people using that. So from their perspective, it's not more like they don't have any kind of resources involved in that. They already did the work, just have other people using for free. So let's see. In the past maybe 20 plus years, somehow the trend changed, and we have what we call the large open source project, and there are a bunch of them. And what's the difference here? Well, in such projects, people are like full time involved. For them, it's a full job style. It's not a hobby that you do. It's your day by day activity. The approach changes. It's not like just take it for free. It's open. Open meaning, okay, it's shared. So shared means you have a two-way communication. So it's not only you give the code for free for other people, but also you expect and you get a lot of contribution. So that's why it's open. You have a community that actually works together over the project, and such projects, they do start consuming resources because okay, you have to invest a lot of manpowers in running such projects. You have people writing code. You have to provide community support, which takes a lot of time. You have a bug tracker, which again, for the community, which again requires a lot of time. You need to invest in testing. Of course, we are now talking about community level testing, but overall, it takes a lot of manpower. Not to mention that, okay, you have also some infrastructure costs. You need to host things. You are using third-party services attached to the project, like for example, we are using a lot Slack channels, we host blogs and so on and so on. So at the first day, sounds like a bit of grains of sand, but at the end, then you fill it the whole beach with that. So costs are simply piling up. So trying to summarize over here, when you are running a large project, everything spins around the concept of sharing with the community. So it's not one or two persons just providing free code. You have a bunch of people working together and benefiting from the end results, but in the same time, you need to have the idea of also sharing the costs and the resources. So there is sharing between, okay, we share the deliverable, but also we need the support from community in order for the project to function. So that's how to say, that's the first idea to remember. Moving on, okay, we have the open source, and then how the open source and industry embracing actually worked. Because this was like from the very beginning kind of love and hate relation between for the industry trying to adopt in terms of using open source. And we have some love factors over here. First of all, yeah, okay, code it's for free, so that's a very strong argument in here. Companies taking into consideration the usage of open source, they have the possibility to get involved. So that's a big plus. The vendor, getting rid of the vendor trap. That's also something interesting, because you are using a project. Maybe I'm working with some project with persons in order to get support, help for the development for that project. Okay, that person goes away, whatever. Okay, I have alternatives. I can get in the same project to other people in the community in order more or less to get ideally the same. And the idea that okay, we'll just use the loud voice. That's a better microphone. And we also have the idea of keeping the ball rolling, the fact that the company gets involved, or let's say generic user gets involved, you need some small customization on the source, they come up with small ideas back to them, they contribute back. And if everybody does the same, you know, they pile up a lot of contribution back, that helps a lot of on the project, because step by step it becomes more and more attractive for the next people using it. And also they've mentioned the fast developing cycle when it comes to the open source projects. Usually if you go to like an, you know, to a vendor and say, hey, I need some changes, they say, oh, okay, well, hold on and wait, maybe at least 6 months plus for that. In open source, that may be available in a matter of days or weeks, depending on, let's say, how big the need is. Probably you'll find somebody to do it for you and get it done pretty fast. So yeah, that was the love factors, but we have also some hate factors. Why there was a bit of a reluctance in terms of adopting open source in the industry. Well, you know, when you start operating things and run businesses and you know, services and so on software, you expect to have some solid grounds, to have something reliable, somebody to keep to let's say have your back when something goes wrong. If you discover a bug or something, you need to have some guarantee that will be someone ready to fix it, and also to have some predictability when it comes to that software, because you know, businesses, they tend to make plans about it. It's not like, okay, only for the next month or two. You need to understand, okay, maybe when the next release will be available and so on. So a lot of things that, from this perspective, that, let's say in the very beginning, they were not so appealing when it comes to the open source. Next, when it comes to the so-called hate factor. That was not part of the plan. No. Yeah. Yeah, having free code, it's great, but in order to use it, you know, companies do expect, okay, how do I get training about it? How can I get the consultancy? I mean, just having the software itself, it's not sufficient if you want to build things on top of it, or if you start operating. You expect to get a lot of additional services to be available. So it's not only about the code. And there was again a reluctance about adopting the open source code, because it doesn't give you any kind of advantage over the competition. Because okay, if the competition uses the same, okay, what's my advantage? You know, we are using the same base code. But the idea here, you know, it's not the code where you get the advantage, it's how to use it and what you build on top. We're going to see later. So again, trying to draw some conclusions here. Second point, well, we call it the naked open source. It's not necessarily so appealing to the industry, because basically in order to address what the industry needs, in order to operate, you know, businesses on top, you need to come up with a lot of, let's say, wrapping on top of open source, to build up, maybe integrate it with other software, maybe to build, let's say, APIs to add high availability systems, yeah, and so on, in order to fit to what the industry expects from a software. And at the end of the day, you know, looking from all these perspectives, large open source projects, more or less, it's like a small company. You have the costs and you have deliverables. So you need to, you know, you need to take care of these. So let's look now in actually what is the topic of the presentation, about how we do address all this in the OpenShift project. First, about the project. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with what OpenShift is. Well, definitely yes. It's a large open source under. Okay. Of course. Thanks. So, what OpenShift project is? Well, it's a large open source under GPL's license project, and it's a generic SIP server. So basically, whatever comes to SIP you can use OpenShips to have it as a register, to have it as a proxy, a back-to-back user agent, and so on and so on. So again, whatever are your needs when it comes to SIP, okay, you can resolve with OpenShips. Some of the important aspects of the project, it's a SIP proxy. It's a highly scalable one. So we are talking about a single instance being able to do like maybe 20, 30,000 calls per second, being able to handle several hundreds of thousands of simultaneous calls, and so on. It's a very flexible and at the same time configurable. Flexible, we have like more than 150 modules, bringing different kind of features into that can be used inside what we call an configuration script. So basically, you describe into kind of a shell scripting how the OpenShips will behave in terms of handling the SIP traffic. So it's highly configurable. Basically, you can do whatever kind of a logic you need inside the project. We have a lot of history behind with the project, probably more than almost let's say 15 years. We have a high ratio of being adopted and used in the telecom industry. So all the time we have surprises coming from different kind of companies saying, hey, we are using. They're a bit shy in admitting sometimes, but the truth is coming out step by step. And part of this success about being adopted by the telecom industry is the fact that we, as a project, we consider that one of the most important ideas in the project is to identify and address the industry needs. Basically, we are building a project that solves some problems. It's not like a hobby and just making a project for the sake of, yes, we have an open source project, blah. No, we are trying to solve some existing, let's say, needs when it comes to the telecom industry. So let's see what we do as a project when it comes to the so-called industry adoption. And stage one, we call it, it's trying to be more than a naked software, so just a piece of software. And for that, next to OpenShips as software itself, we have a quite complex ecosystem of other softwares that may be used together, like command line interfaces, web interfaces, APIs to be used together with OpenShips, and lately also a testing framework for our project. So I'll just quickly go through this. You can again have all these applications together with a project again to allow you to build more complex and closer to a complete solution when it comes to building products. So at the end, what we try to achieve is to have something more than code only. We demonstrated actually in the last years that it's a reliable project that you can base on when it comes to using. It is predictable. We already have a quite well-defined release plan once per year. We have minor releases, so all the time you know exactly what's next, so you can do the planning. We have a good community support with trackers, mailing lists, so we encourage people to work with us, open to ideas and contributions. 2 years ago, we had a security audit. Everybody's interested in security, so we had a professional security audit, thanks to Enable Security. They went through, so that was actually a community effort in terms of covering the costs for that, because definitely such as audit costs. We have each year we have a OpenShift Summit conference in order to discuss about what was done, what needs to be done further, exchange ideas and so on. And yeah, that's actually part of our model of being driven by the industry's needs. Next, stage 2. So first, okay, we try to build a lot of context around the project to be more appealing. But in terms of supporting the project, stage 2 is what we call the duality of the project. Basically, you know, in most of the cases, we need, you know, running the project requires a lot of resources to be involved. So basically, we have what we call the industry phase. So the same together with the project, we have the company next to it trying to address the resources for the project. In this case, we have the SIP Hub, which is providing most of the cost for running the project in terms of manpower, in terms of infrastructure, and so on. And it's a bidirectional relation, so it's kind of a symbiosis between the two. While the company is supporting the project, we are also taking advantage of a lot of knowledge produced by the project in order to, you know, build some great solutions. So they work hand in hand, supporting one each other, and you will see probably this model in many cases when it comes to the projects. Because again, an open source project, you know, it's like a small business. It has to get some, you know, some income from somewhere in order to be able to produce. So in our case, the CPAP is the one providing the incoming or covering the cost for the project, so that you know, we keep up the pace with the development. In both sides, in the OpenSIP side, so the open source, and in the SIP Hub, in the business side, basically we have the same people involved. So it's the same team, but with two roles playing along both in the open source and in the business side. So basically, what we do here with the projects, we are taking OpenShips and we are wrapping into different kind of products in order to fit to make it ready for industry. So basically, products or solutions that you can take and operate into businesses. And by doing that, we get in touch with what is new in the industry, what is needed in the industry. So that brings a lot of ideas, of course, because when we are trying to implement, let's say, a new kind of product, we need also to do some new coding eventually. And this coding is going back into the project. So there is a lot of, again, ideas, code or traction, like sometimes we start discussion about, like we did lately about different things about IMS, about RCS and stuff like that. And there was a lot of traction, and then a lot of code into that going back into the project. So the idea that we explore different things into the industry side has a quite good impact back into the project. And okay, the CPAP is the one trying to address also a lot of the OpenShips project resources, more or less putting the bread on the table for the developers. So, well, the typical question is, okay, if it's open source, okay, what do you have to sell about it? And you can achieve this in different ways. Well, at the end of the day, you know, the code it's free. You can take it and use it. But the idea is you also may need a lot of knowledge in terms of how to use the code, especially in our case, OpenShift is quite complex. And the learning curve is quite steep, so probably you will need maybe, let's say, 6 months at least to get used to how to use it. in order to start building something. So you have to invest in people to get trained or to take knowledge. So basically, what we are doing, we are selling the knowledge, which is a quite valuable merchandise when it comes to the projects. And this knowledge may be delivered either as services, support, consultancy, training, and so on, or in our cases through the CPAP, we embed this knowledge into products. So we take OpenShips and we configure, for example, to act as a session border controller, or to act as a soft switch, or as a trunking system, and so on. So you need a lot of knowledge in terms of how to do it, not only on the OpenShips side, but also to put together, to integrate the solution with databases, APIs, and so on and so on. So a lot of things that you need to put together with the OpenShips itself in order to build a working complete solution. Why do we call them engines? As an analogy, it's like in a car. You have an engine, but that's not sufficient. You need to put together the rest of the car, just to have the driver in it and to make it work. But still, the engine is the most valuable part of the car. And in analogy, the OpenShips is, or what we do with OpenShips, it's the actual engine. But we stop at the API levels, letting whoever it's using, to build on top, in terms of building on top of the APIs, to build, interfaces, whatever they want, user interfaces, provisioning interfaces, and so on and so on. Because basically, that's the thing that personalizes the companies, and it's impossible to address this, case by case. So in that case, we just provide the APIs like a building block, and then on top you can build your own interfaces. And we did a lot of such building blocks, such engines. Again, trying to cover more or less the most what we think to be the most interesting services when it comes to SIP, like trunking, soft switches, SBCs, and so on. And how we actually do this, again, taking the OpenShips, putting together with a lot of provisioning, managing, because at the end of the day you want to have some kind of a product that it's ready to be operated. So you troubleshoot, it gives you reports, you are able to provision things into, you have high availability address, you can do scalability and so on. So you need to bundle all these together. It's not only the OpenShips. So basically that's what we are doing. And because it's it's open source, of course the cost with the license of the software is low. Then we can invest a lot of attention and of course cost into other areas. For example, getting a high level of customization, because when you go and buy let's say a product which involves a lot of licenses, probably 80% of the cost goes into the license, and that's it. And you'll get from the vendor, okay, if you need something else, it cannot be changed, take it or leave it. So it's a kind of a deal that it's not really flexible. When you use like open source, you have more or less like zero cost with when it comes to the licenses, so you can divert eventual part of the cost into customization. So you can get exactly, the customer can get 100% exactly what he needs from you. It's not like a 70-80%. Thanks to the API, it's very easy to integrate. We have a lot of programmability, a lot of flows in there that you can play with in the products, and all these engines are ideal for building and powering all this service kind of, as a service kind of services you have right now. And of course you can run it in different kind of environments. We take advantage of the project itself because the OpenShift brings a lot of throughput, already mentioned. We have a lot of features ready in there. And we are trying, sometimes it's very hard for us, even if it's the same team, to push all the features that are popping up into the project, to have them reflected into the products. Like we are still pending in trying to add all the MSRP and RCS chat part into the products, because things are usually moving because of the testing a bit slower on the product side rather than the actual open source project. So the OpenShift it's a very good project in order to build around. Just as an idea, we have a lot of what defines us as an engine, the fact that everything is driven through APIs and events. So basically, it's a kind of a, from your perspective, if you try to use it, it's a black box. You don't need actually to understand or to be aware of what is beneath. You have the APIs, everything is driven through that part. You get events in order to understand what's going on, and that's it. You are ready to go. In terms of high availability and scalability, we went with, again, thanks to the project, with a lot of clustering concept. So we do the geo-redundancy and also geo-scalability in the same time. So from this perspective, again, thanks to the project. And just to conclude, all these are contributing back to the project, because whatever happens, let's say on the industry side, on the commercial side, it's automatically reflecting back into the project. So whenever we have ideas, whenever we have some code done or a challenge, all these are pushed back into the project and automatically available for the community. So that's like a huge repository of knowledge and code that other people may use too. And the project is also covered in terms of resources, and we are keeping we are using actually the project as a boiling point, a coagulation point for different kind of discussions about new, not necessarily new, but hot topics, topics that are interesting for different people. So we are keeping the piece up in order to see exactly what is needed on the industry side. So basically the two ways, meaning going open source project and the companion, some kind of a commercial companion is sometimes a good combination, because you get a lot of tractions coming from two directions. They help one each other, so it's definitely better than just having one side of this. So I don't want to keep you more, because lunch is here. Yes. No. Okay. So I can keep you more.
But yeah, no, this was excellent, Bogdan. Thank you so much. The lunch is not here yet. I've pinged Patrice to ask, but please, Q&A.
Okay.
I had a question, in fact, for you and for Dave too. My question was, how do you manage the product backlog? I mean, we've got plenty of ideas that comes from your experience when you interact with clients, and also you've got the community that can have some needs to the improvement of your solution. And so that's a simple question: is how you organize that, how you do the prioritization of that stack of features. Does that only rely on your final hand, or do you also, I don't know, arbitrate? How do you animate that process? Maybe Dave also would have an answer.
Well, at least from our side, from the OpenSys project, things are quite straightforward. They refined during the years before each release. So basically, when we are looking for what should be the next steps, we have public polls in terms of what are the interesting topics and what are the voting. So we try to get some feeling about what are the topics and what is the importance of different topics for the community. And of course, then we put everything in a box together with what we would like to get. We are mixing well and trying to find some synergies between the two, like some overlapping between what we do and so on. But it's also what Dave said about the P1 and the P2, so about the value of each topic, like what kind of a value may bring overall, let's say, to the project, or we consider ourselves also part of the project, like another users of the project. So we are not trying to see us necessarily like special when it comes to what needs to be done. So we're trying to put on the same level with the rest of our community members. Dave, do you?
Yeah, in my case, our project is fairly small and it's fairly informal. So we don't have a formal governance model, which I could see us moving to. So a lot of things do really come down to my decision, based on what I think will be most valuable for the project. A lot of times there's back and forth. If someone will request something, I won't understand it. I'll say, well, what's the use case here? Describe it, and then I'll say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, factored into that, if a customer's on a support contract, part of that is we are going to prioritize his feature requests. So it's likely, if you're on a support contract and you ask for something, we're going to do it, because we need a certain percentage of the community putting fuel in this thing to move it forward.
The value.
Yeah. So today it's kind of informal, and which I think befits the stage of the project. In the future, I could see more of a formal governance model and something like that.
As far as I understand, I think there is also an issue, or not an issue, but a stake is to keep the product homogeneous. I don't know, it means something. I mean, you need to have a product vision and also not building a pile of functions that some way are interacting together. You need to build something that is that makes sense and consistent. Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes when you are too open to suggestions and you take those suggestions and try to make something from bottom up, in the end you've got something that is very diversified, and sometimes maybe you need more leadership into what needs to be built so that the product looks like something.
Yeah, if I could just, I definitely, like a lot of times someone will ask for something in a certain way, and I will not want to do it that way because it'll make the code. I just don't want it to go in the architecture that way, so I will often say, well, no, but can we meet the same, here's how I would do it. I would do this, so I would change that. Another thing that I'd be interested in, it's about TADSummit, people come and ask for a feature and then they want they don't want it to be part of the open source, which is also always a challenge, or they want some exclusivity. Don't make it part of the open source for 6 months. I don't do that because it's not, it's just too complicated. And I don't entertain those at all, but that's a common thing that comes sometimes from commercial customers. So I just have a hard and fast rule there. I'm not sure if that's something you have to address, or it was a question I was going to ask you anyways.
No, that's a good point. Trying to keep everything under control. When it comes to first, as Dave said, that's a strict policy. Like everything developed, even if it's paid by someone to be developed, goes automatically into the open source project. So it's nothing kept private to anyone. And secondly, everything has to go through the so-called consistency filter. So we don't want to have like a project which is just a pile of stuff, difficult to manage. Everything needs to to be well integrated and follow some straight concepts into the project. And sometimes we are in the situation to I wouldn't call reject, but maybe second for reviewing different kind of contributions, because they are addressing a very specific case, very strange one, maybe particular, but the way it's addressed, it's so particular that you cannot have it like in the project. You need to put it in a way that it's also usable by other people. It's not something particular to you. So yeah, sometimes we need to keep an eye on that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bogdan.
Thank you.
It was always one of the most shocking things as I got to understand how open source works in the comms industry. It's just how little support comes from the big corporate users. It's challenging and a relatively unique position compared to some of the enterprise open source projects. So it's a cultural thing as well. I just look at it as if somebody provides a good service, there's this thing called tipping. And given the money that's flowing through those large organizations, even if it was, 15% tip would be massive.
But that's perfectly true. Like the small medium companies are more willing to get involved and to support. I mean, at the end of the day, they are using something. It's not like they are giving you for free. But they are more willing to get involved and to support rather than the big companies, which from time to time you just discover, hey, these guys are using, but they haven't said anything. Okay, that's part of open source. Nobody, there is no obligation to do that. But sometimes you also get a bit of a pressure from people, for example, when they discover bugs or they want some problems to be resolved, and then they start being pushing, like, hey, can you help me in here and here? And I said, okay, it's a best effort when it comes to helping community. I mean, you cannot do like an SLA for everybody. It's something for free. So and again, they are a bit reluctant in getting involved into supporting. They just preferring to go under the into the anonymous way, we say.
But that's why I think what you're doing with SIP Labs is really interesting in trying to create more value and more monetization paths. So I think it's a really good idea. Interested to see how that one works out. So the food's going to be here in a couple of minutes. So what I suggest is we've been sat here for a while. It's getting a bit hot. I've opened the windows at the back and we'll open the windows here. There's a beautiful balcony. So get some fresh air. And when the food is here, I'll call you in. Okay?
I wouldn't survive it.
Sorry? Yeah, I'm trying to take a shot for the video. Yeah, that's yes. But do you follow me on TikTok?
I have to bring everybody to cook. Yeah, we take the best. Yeah, exactly. You need something, right? You want to spend the money on something. What can you do?
You already have
We've had enough pictures of the two over the years.
So how does this TikTok stuff work?
No, it's a TikTok style video. It's not really a TikTok.
Okay, there you go. So, two little girls in the
Yeah. You're over 30,
Okay, good. Perfect. Thanks for all that help. Thanks for the help.
Life is taking a fast, right?